I'm moving to Los Angeles to try and become a talent agent in Hollywood. My name is Gabriel, and in this video, I'll be telling you why I'm moving across the country to chase my dreams, how I went from being a socially anxious, confused kid to someone with inner confidence and purpose, and what the secret is to living the life of your dreams. After graduating in 2023 from Duke, without a job lined up, I felt like a failure when I went back home to move in with my parents. I thought maybe I was stupid for choosing to carve out my own path in life. But now, after having lived in Houston for more than a year, I've learned that each part of your life helps to inform your entire existence. As I drive out of Texas, through Arizona, and into California, I'll tell you my story, and along the way, I'll be sharing takeaways I figured out that I wish I knew when I was younger. It took me 2 days to ride out of Texas, but now I'm finally driving into California, and I couldn't be more excited. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to be an engineer. I think one of my first memories is actually of getting a Lego set for Christmas and the joy of putting it together. And I spent a lot of my childhood just, kind of alone in my room building Legos, building different creations. And I was obsessed with science, technology. I read popular mechanics, popular science. And so I was really attracted to engineering from a very early age. And I kind of took it for granted that that's what my career was going to be. So in high school, I started building RC planes and got really into flight. I remember spending hours watching YouTube videos and learning different building techniques for building foam aircraft. I competed in the Arizona State Engineering Fair for 2 years. The first time building a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And then the next year I actually built a solar power airplane with the help of the ASU Solar Power Lab. And so I kind of accidentally stumbled into this career in engineering. And so when I got into Duke, into the engineering program, I knew that that was kind of where my future was headed. I was going to be an engineer. I wanted to work for a company like SpaceX or Boston Dynamics. But in 2020, everything changed for me. I think a lot of you watching will probably remember where you were in 2020 when COVID kind of changed everything about what we knew about the world, right? I think that was a real turning point for me, especially because I went from having this super active social life and being really busy with school, participating in all these different clubs, feeling like I was full steam ahead on this thing that I've been working towards for my entire life. And then suddenly, in the flip of a moment, I had all this time to reflect. And for one of the first periods in my life, I started to think about if engineering was actually the thing that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I didn't really know if I clicked with other engineers. I really felt more at home with artists, with people who are in the liberal arts, with people who are obsessed with literature or music or films. Those were really my people. And then another thing was, honestly, I wasn't that great at math. It was something that I was I got good grades in, and I was in advanced math classes for most of my life, but it wasn't really out of love for the subject. It was more so a product of me being a good test taker and being able to learn things quickly. But I really never loved math. And I think one of the common traits that I found in all the successful people who were in engineering was that they had a passion for physics and math and the base idea of figuring out mathematical solutions to problems, and that just wasn't me. You really need to love the base thing of whatever it is that you're studying or whatever it is you're pursuing. I was sort of starting to think that I needed to find something else. I didn't really know what it was at the time, but I was starting to think that maybe it wasn't engineering. And that was what was going through my mind when I watched Ratatouille. In the summer of 2020, I really didn't have a lot to do. Everyone was locked down. I just spent that time watching a lot of movies. And one of those movies was a movie from my childhood called Ratatouille. And I don't know what it was about that movie, but I just remember vividly crying a lot during it and having this extreme emotional reaction because it was a story about following your passions, even if everyone else is telling you that you shouldn't and that you're stupid for doing it. And something with that really resonated with me. For most of my life at that time, I had just been going with the flow of what other people wanted for me, whether that was teachers who thought that I was good at engineering or physics and wanted me to pursue that, or even my parents who were encouraging me to sort of pursue a career in engineering, because that's kind of what my dad did. And it makes sense because it's a solid career with good financial opportunities. There's a lot of great things going for engineering, and I do think for a lot of people it can be a very fulfilling career. But after watching Ratatouille, I just felt like it wasn't that thing that made me want to wake up every single day and give it my all. And so I started the process of switching out of the engineering school and switching into the liberal arts school. And throughout that process, I talked to a lot of different people, including my engineering advisor. So at Duke, everyone gets an advisor. If you're in the liberal arts school, you'll get a liberal arts advisor. And if you're in the engineering school, you'll get an engineering advisor. And my advisor was a professor who had had a long career in industry. He had been designing engines for Rolls-Royce and eventually started, designing planes and engine parts for Boeing. He had kind of had this career that I thought I wanted. He was very successful. And so I asked him what I should do. And thankfully, he didn't tell me one way or the other, like you should do this or you should do that. If you're getting advice from someone and they're telling you what you should do with your life, take it with a grain of salt. But instead, what he did was he told me this story about a friend of his who was kind of in the same position that I was in. His friend was an engineer who was also really interested in film and producing movies. And he had worked on a couple projects, and he was deciding if he wanted to fully commit to film or fully commit to engineering when he came across this opportunity to work with a new up-and-coming director. And his friend turned it down and ended up having a very successful career as an engineer. But the movie that he turned down was Jaws, and the filmmaker that he turned down working with was Steven Spielberg. The message that I got from that story is that you really only have so many opportunities to chase the life that you want to live. And the more of those opportunities that you turn down, I think the more regrets you have. And so after listening to that story, I was pretty confident that engineering wasn't the thing that I wanted to focus on. And I really didn't know what was the thing that I wanted to focus on. But I decided at that moment that it was time for me to take that next step and to switch from the Pratt School of Engineering to the Trinity School of Arts and Sciences. Which leads me to the first takeaway that I'm going to share with you, which is that introspection is incredibly powerful. I think it's seldomly used, and ultimately, you're the only person who can decide what kind of life you want to live. I mean, taking advice from other people is great, and that's what I've done throughout my journey, is hear from the perspective of other people, but they can't make that decision for you. You really have to think about what it is, really what kind of lifestyle you want, and from there, decide what kind of actions you want to take to achieve that lifestyle. So heading into my sophomore year of college, I really wanted to find out what was that thing that I was passionate enough about to spend the rest of my life doing. And I stumbled across this club called Freewater Productions. In high school, some of my fondest memories were making videos and making films with my friends. I remember we had these class projects where we just got together and put together these really fun projects. One time we made this telenovela, and it was just an hour-long telenovela. We kind of goofed off the entire time, but I mean, it was so fun, and that was where I really got exposed to the magic of filmmaking and the magic, really, of working on a creative project with your friends. So this film production company, Freewater Productions, it was for Duke students, by Duke students, and it was completely self-run. And it was this amazing community of filmmakers. I kind of realized joining the club that I had been searching for a community my entire life and never really found it. I never really found it among engineers. I never really found it in high school. And I was starting to think that maybe filmmaking was that thing where I could find my people and find my community. So I started making films with other people. And it was one of the most creatively fulfilling things that I had ever done. And then another thing about joining the club was I actually started to meet people who were seriously trying to create a career in the film industry. So growing up, I didn't know anybody who wanted to pursue a career in film. And to me, it wasn't really like a career path that was realistic, right? And for good reason. I think, it's very specialized to just a few cities. Los Angeles, New York. Now it's in, more cities, but still it's very niche. And there's not a lot of people who are filmmakers or artists or working in this sort of creative space. But when I found out about it, I was just hooked. And then I found out about this program called the Duke in LA program. And it was basically a specialized study abroad kind of program set in LA, where you got to network with people who are in the film industry and learn about Los Angeles as the center of film and media production. So when I found out about this, I was all in, and I wanted to dive into it as deeply as I possibly could. So I started learning about all these different career paths and all these different Duke alum who are successful in the film industry. And I realized that it's not a traditional career path, but there are people out there who are making successful careers out of a creative endeavor, whether that's being a producer, being a director, being an actor. There are people who are making it. And so I wanted to be one of those people. So my second semester of sophomore year, I officially made the switch from engineering to liberal arts. I was still a computer science major, so I was still keeping one foot in that kind of STEM background as like a backup. But I started taking some film classes, and I did a virtual version of the Duke in LA program where I got to intern at a film production company called the Bonaventura Pictures. And this is the film production company that made all the Transformers movies and some other action films. And they had an overall deal with Paramount Pictures, so they worked with the studio. And as an intern there, my main job was to do script coverage. For those of you who've worked in the industry, you know what this is. But if you're just finding out about film careers and you really want to, get your foot in the door somewhere, you're probably going to start out as an intern doing script coverage. So script coverage is where you take all the incoming submissions that these production companies get. So maybe that's books that are being considered for adaptation into films or TV shows, or maybe that's, a brand new spec script from a TV writer or a screenwriter. And so it's kind of interesting, but the entry level, people, like all these interns and assistants who are reading all these scripts and then evaluating them and deciding whether they're good or not, basically your job is to just give like a summary of the script or the project, and then that helps the producer or the executive who you're working for to decide, okay, is this a project you want to pass on, or is this a project that you want to actually take on and consider for development? And so all these interns and assistants are kind of like the first gatekeepers for what gets made in Hollywood, which is super interesting. And so that was sort of my first actual professional experience in the film industry. And it was perfect because it was remote. Everything was remote at the time because of COVID. And so I was able to get these opportunities that really didn't exist before. And so I'm super grateful for that. Another thing that didn't help so much though was that film production was a little bit harder to do on campus, just because getting together was a bit tough. And there were a lot of things that made it a bit difficult to actually make short films. But despite that, I really wanted to get on film sets. And so I reached out to this guy who was looking for a cinematographer, and I had never done cinematography before, but I was watching all these Film Riot videos on YouTube and learning about film lighting and different camera techniques. And this was something that I was super into. So I was like, hey, I can do cinematography for your film. And I ended up using this camera. It was a Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro, and it was the first real film camera that I ever used. And we ended up shooting this short film, and it was a completely magical experience. It was so fun, and it was one of the major moments where I realized that, okay, this is actually, there's something to this. Like, filmmaking is actually something that I could see myself putting a lot of my passion towards. And so I was starting to think, okay, what kind of career did I want to do? Did I want to be a writer? Did I want to be a director? Did I want to be a producer? Did I want to be a studio executive? Did I want to be a cinematographer? At the time, I was more drawn to cinematography and sort of the filmmaking and production side of things. And so that's what I tried to get experience in. That summer, I wanted to do another internship because I wanted to set myself up well for a position where I could do the Duke in LA program and get a fantastic internship. And so I applied to tons of places. And the way I did this was basically, I made a list of all of my favorite movies and TV shows. And then I found the production companies that were actually responsible for putting them together. And I think this is a great way of finding opportunities in the film industry, because anytime that you interview somewhere, they're gonna ask you what projects that they've worked on that you've seen. And if you have a personal connection to the projects that they've made, that gives you a much better chance of actually landing an internship. And so there was this film production company, one of the many that I applied to. They made this Stephen King adaptation and this documentary that I really loved. And so I ended up cold outreaching to them based on an email that they had put on their website. And I ended up getting an interview, and that ended up being my second internship I did in the film industry. So by the time I knew it, pretty much a full year had gone by, and I was entering my first semester of my junior year of college. And something that I haven't really been talking about, but hugely impacted my life at the time, was this sense of social anxiety that I was starting to develop. And a lot of it was directly because of COVID and being kind of shut in for a couple of years, not really getting the chance to get out there and practice social skills. I felt this extreme level of fear anytime I walked outside. And so it was a little bit of agoraphobia as well. And I think maybe some of you can probably relate. It's just during that time, I think a lot of people struggled mentally, and that was absolutely the case for me. But despite that, I was still trying to get out there and, get onto more free water projects. I also ended up joining this other club called the Duke Independent Film Festival, where every year we put on this huge film festival, and then we wrote articles and did different filmmaking events. And it was another great way to sort of get involved in the filmmaking community at Duke. I started acting for the first time. I produced a couple films for free water and just got really involved in filmmaking. And then I started reaching out to a ton of people who were successful in the film industry. And this leads me to my number 2 takeaway that I have for you guys, which is for any type of career you want to have, but especially for careers that are a little bit more unique, it's so important to actually talk to people who are successful doing the kind of career that you want to do and living the kind of lifestyle that you want to have. And so this is what I did. I just went on LinkedIn and reached out to Duke alum. I tried to reach out to friends of friends or people that my professors could put me in contact with. And I just started doing all of these calls with people, asking them about how they made it in the film industry and what they liked about their job, what they didn't like, and what type of advice they would have for someone who's about to try and make a career in the film industry. And that was super invaluable because there were tons of career paths that I didn't even know existed that you really have to learn about by kind of asking people and looking on LinkedIn and trying to connect with people who are trying to do a creative career. Another thing that was going on in my mind at the time was if I should actually fully commit to film. So like I said, my major was actually computer science, and I was actually taking computer science classes at the time kind of as a backup plan in case things didn't go well with film and maybe it didn't turn out to be the thing that I was most passionate about. Pretty much everyone that I had talked to in the film industry said that it was incredibly hard to break into the industry, and it's even harder to sustain a career because burnout is really easy. And even though it's a creative career that's so close to storytelling, there's a lot of things about the business that aren't so great for your mental health or for your career in general. Pay is often low, especially for early career positions. And so the number one thing that a lot of people told me was that you really needed to love it. You really needed to love storytelling. You needed to love movies and TV shows and media in order to really become successful and create a career that you love. And that's one of the main reasons that I decided to apply to the Duke NLA program. I wanted it to be the test of if I really loved film enough to fully commit to it. I basically designed my curriculum at the time to give me a plan B in case I wanted it. So I was taking these computer science classes and I was planning to do the Duke NLA program the second semester of my junior year. And so if I really wanted to, I could take a bunch of computer science classes my senior year of college and graduate with a CS degree and just go full steam ahead, try and become a programmer somewhere. Plus, the program was really my chance to get away from Duke, get away from my social anxiety, and try and discover who I really was, independent from this whole environment where I was honestly feeling pretty anxious at the time. So why Los Angeles? Duke has tons of study abroad opportunities all across the world. I had friends who did amazing programs at Oxford or Cambridge or in Japan or in different parts of Europe or South America. But I chose to stay in the country and do my program in LA because Los Angeles is still the heart of film and media production. Yeah, film production has kind of diversified and it's all across the country and all across the world now. But all of the decisions are still being made in LA. And LA is still the home for all of these creatives and all of these decision makers who are really leading the industry. It's where all the major studios are located. It's where all the agencies are. And there was a ton about the program that I was really attracted to. For one, I got to take classes at USC, which has one of the best film programs in the entire country. And I would get to explore the city and its main industry, film production, media, entertainment, and culture production, really. Plus, it was a small environment of about 12 people, so I thought it would be a perfect chance to make new friends and kind of rediscover my identity a little bit. But when I got to LA, it was a little bit of a culture shock, I'm not gonna lie. This was my first time in the heart of a big city. I mean, I had lived in Phoenix before, but it was really the suburbs. And Durham is really kind of a small town in North Carolina compared to Los Angeles. Plus, USC isn't really in the best part of town. And, you know, there are just a lot of things that are a bit sketchy and a bit scary about living in a city like LA. The hustle and bustle of it all. There's tons of noise all the time. There's police sirens going off constantly. And just this feeling of danger that's present pretty much the second you step off of USC's campus. And this was really not great for my social anxiety, actually. You know, my whole life, I've been pretty shy and anxious. I kind of went with the flow of what other people wanted from me. And I was a huge people pleaser. So I was constantly afraid of what other people thought of me. And I always wanted to fit in to, you know, a community or a friend group or something like that. And so I was desperate for the attention of others without even realizing it. And I was super anxious about judgment from other people. You know, at Duke, I went into it super confident and made all of these really great friends. But then when COVID happened, it kind of shook everything up for me. And I started feeling this intense feeling of, you know, missing out, this FOMO. And Duke is also a really competitive social scene. It's kind of a small school, and so everyone kind of knows each other. And I felt like I was falling behind when it came to meeting friends or really like being a part of the social scene. I mean, I had friends and I was going to parties, but I felt like I wasn't cool. You know, I felt like I wasn't part of this group of the elite students at the school who were really partying all the time. You know, I didn't feel like I was a part of that social scene where everyone was having fun. I felt like I was missing out on a ton. Looking back, I don't really think that was true. I think I actually made the most of my experience, but you know, it's really easy when you struggle with social anxiety to constantly compare yourself to others and to think that other people are just more confident or better than you in some way. So that was one of the things that I really wanted to get over it, you know, during this program. So let me tell you a little bit more about what it was like to actually do the Duke in LA program. As I said, it was a smaller program. It was about 12 of us, and all of my classmates were super cool, and they were all doing different things in media, art, and entertainment. Not everyone wanted to fully pursue a career in media, but everyone kind of had this creative spirit to them, which I really appreciated. And I felt like I was starting to discover who my people really were, like who the people I really connected with were. Plus, the classes that I got to take at USC were incredible. I took this class called Film Symposium, and basically every single week we saw a movie that was about to come out in theaters and then got to ask questions to the filmmakers who were involved in it. So we saw The Northman by Robert Eggers, and our class got to ask him questions about the production and how he does research. We saw Drive My Car, which ended up being really critically acclaimed, and got to ask questions to the producer using a translator. And then we saw tons of films that I otherwise wouldn't have seen, like The Outfit, which ended up being like one of my favorite films of the year, and actually a huge inspiration for this period piece that I was writing. And then I think my favorite moment in the class was watching The Batman and being able to ask Matt Reeves, the director, a question about using that Nirvana song at the beginning. It's just so cool to be able to actually ask these people and to sit in front of them and to hear them speak about their creative process. And it was really enlightening for what type of career I wanted to have, because each week it was kind of like a different person who worked on a different part of the film. One week it was one of the writers, another time it was a producer, The next time it was the director. Sometimes it was even people who were more on the wardrobe side of things, or more on the film production side of things, or the cinematographer, or the people who were working on the soundtrack or the music. And it was so cool to see all these different people who were working on all these different parts of the film. Exploring USC was a ton of fun. It was a completely different vibe from Duke. And exploring Los Angeles was absolutely amazing. We got to go to a bunch of different neighborhoods in this one class where we literally just explored everything that LA had to offer. So by the time I knew it, spring break had come around and I was already halfway through the semester. Instead of taking a break though, I decided to spend my spring break working on USC MFA thesis films. And that became absolutely one of the best experiences of my life. I had never really been on a large film production before and never really been on a professional film production before. And so being able to see people who were, they were still film students, but they were in the master's program and they really knew their stuff. They put together some incredible films and I worked as a grip setting up equipment. And it was really cool to see what an actual professional film production workflow looked like. So I tried to capture as much of that knowledge as I could and to take it back with me for free water production. Another thing about working on those film sets is that I realized that I was really attracted to chaotic situations, which might sound weird, but actually when everything is feeling chaotic, I kind of feel this sense of peace and calm. Like I know what the next thing I need to do is. And film sets are like that. Even the best run film set, people are running around all over the place. People are setting stuff up. And there's this sense of kind of chaos that I actually kind of really love. There's just a ton of energy. And if you've ever been on a film set, you know what I mean. And for me, film sets are actually my favorite place on earth. They're where I've connected with people super deeply. And I realized that in my career, I definitely want to continue having a foot in film production and being on set. So by the time the end of the semester came, I really tried to become intentional about being introspective and trying to figure out who I actually was and really trying to enjoy solitude for the first time in my life. I feel like up until this point, I'd always been in this state of mind where I needed friends, I needed other people to feel satisfied. And I felt like if I wasn't hanging out with people, I was missing out on something that was going on. But I really tried to flip around that narrative in my head. One of the things that I really loved doing was taking the metro from USC to Santa Monica and just walking along the beach by myself. I think there's something incredibly calming about the ocean. I love Lovecraftian stories, and there's kind of this sense of awe and wonder that the ocean fills me with. I feel like it's a moment to sort of reflect and realize that we're just these tiny specks of matter in this universe that really doesn't have any meaning except for the meaning that you give it. And I think sometimes we burden ourselves with the opinions of other people or overcomplicate our lives and think about everything that's going on in the world. And really, I think if you take a step back and just kind of relax, it makes life a lot easier. And you can really make life a lot simpler by reducing the amount of things that you need to worry about. And I was starting to really feel a sense of purpose for the first time in my life. I was starting to feel like, yeah, maybe film was this thing that I really wanted to do. And I started to realize it really does not matter what other people think about you. This is something that took me a while to really fully realize, and actually really hasn't been until this past month where it's kind of fully sunk in for me. I read this amazing book called The Courage to be Disliked, which I think has fundamentally changed me more than any other book I've ever read. So I highly recommend it. It'll make you happier and it'll make life simpler for you. So definitely check it out. But it literally doesn't matter what anybody thinks about you. And I think that might sound harsh to some people. Like maybe you should care about what society thinks, or maybe, you should care about what your friends or family think about you, right? Like if you don't care what they think about you, doesn't that mean you're a bad person? And I don't think that's true at all. I mean, ultimately, social anxiety, when it comes down to it, is this fear of what society thinks about you, but it's just completely made up. I mean, it's useful, right? I get why social anxiety is a thing, because if we didn't have social anxiety, we probably would have people who are just out there acting in their own best interests. It's the feeling of caring for other people and caring for what other people think about you that does lead people to, do things that are beneficial for society. But I don't think it's actually a very healthy mentality, especially if you're someone who places way too much emphasis on the opinions of other people. And so I was starting to realize on this whole journey of getting into film that I didn't need to worry what other people thought about me. Plus, you can't really change what other people think about you. And that's really their problem. If what someone else thinks about you is going to change the way that you live your life, then that's giving power to someone else. And I was starting to realize that having agency and being able to choose what I wanted for myself is something that is incredibly important to me. I set up this semester as a test. Could I commit fully to a career in film and feel okay with it? And I was starting to realize that, yeah, I could. I did want to fully commit to film. You don't regret the things that you do, you regret the things that you don't do. I was determined not to regret this moment, this opportunity to live the life of my dreams. So when the end of the semester came around, I packed up all my things into these 2 suitcases. I took a ride on the metro to LAX and listened to Leaving LA by Father John Misty. And I felt this sense of purpose. Like I finally knew what I wanted to do with my life. All right, I'm about 2 hours away from San Diego, so almost there. And then we're gonna stop there for a couple days, go to Legoland. So I'll see you guys there. All right, so to recap the trip, we left Houston on Thursday and got into Phoenix on Friday. Spent a couple of days there, spent some great time with family. And then we left yesterday for San Diego, and that's where we are here. We're gonna go to Legoland in a bit, so gonna check that out. And then after that, we're gonna be going to Los Angeles for my new apartment. So we just left San Diego. We're driving up the Pacific Coast Highway right now, just so we get a bit of a nice scenic view heading into Los Angeles. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the summer before my senior year of college, after the Duke NLA program, when my entire family, basically we uprooted our lives to move to Houston. So as soon as I got back from Los Angeles in the summer of 2023, we basically had like 1 month to pack up all of our things, and we decided to move to Houston just because of the cost of living. And also my sister was going to be studying at Rice, so it was a way to sort of be closer to her as a family. We basically did the opposite of the trip that I'm doing right now and drove out east. So that same summer, I actually did my 3rd internship at a film production company. This time it was for 11 Films. They were like this indie film production company, and they actually made stuff that I was super interested in. Working with them and getting to sit in on meetings with agents, producers, executives was super eye-opening, and definitely one of the best internship experiences that I had. Ultimately, like when we got to Houston, it was actually really nice to kind of get like a second chance to meet new people and, you know, try and settle into this new city. It was something that I've never really experienced before. I never lived in Texas or really spent a lot of time in Texas, but Texas really started to grow on me a little bit, and especially sort of like in the year after I graduated. It's definitely got a lot going for it. And I think Houston is a surprisingly modern city, and it's got a really cool restaurant scene. So that was really fun to just check out different restaurants. And I basically had just enough time to kind of settle in before moving my sister into Rice for her freshman year. And then, I went back to Duke for my senior year of college, which was super surreal because it went by super quickly. I remember like feeling like 4 years ago when I was a freshman that was just like yesterday. And then suddenly I was only like 2 semesters away from graduating. Life moves incredibly fast. You have to appreciate those good moments while you can. And 2, the most important thing that, I got out of college wasn't necessarily learning or, development, although that was incredibly important as well. It was really the relationships I formed, the friendships I formed. And so heading into senior year, I really wanted to focus most of my time and energy on relationships, right? Friends that I made along the way, getting involved in more, clubs and social groups, and really just trying to meet as many people as I could and try and get, develop a deeper relationship with all my friends that I made along the way. One of the things that I really picked up on in Duke and LA was the importance of community. I think, that was one of the focuses on one of the classes that we took, which was just about exploring Los Angeles and a bunch of the different communities in LA. In anything that you want to do, you're really going to need to have some kind of strong community. And in film especially, having a strong community is something that gives you emotional strength and also gives you professional opportunities. Like if you aren't a part of a community, it's really hard to create a career for yourself. You don't necessarily create a career by, just going lone wolf and doing, whatever you want. Film is a super collaborative industry. It's something where you really do need to work with other people. And I think the most successful directors, producers, or executives are people who are able to understand how to work really well with other people. So going into senior year, I also wanted to put a huge emphasis on Freewater Productions, which was the film production company that I was joined in sophomore year, which is kind of the thing that started it all for me. And now in my senior year, I was actually running it. And so I had the opportunity to sort of shape what it could be. And I wanted it to be a safe space for people who wanted to learn more about film, and also a place for filmmakers to get the resources they needed to make the films of their dreams. So I wanted it to be a place where even if you had no experience, you could go get on a set and have a fun time. But at the same time, if you really wanted to take it seriously, you'd have the opportunities, the resources, the equipment, and the people and connections to actually make something that was like a good film. COVID and lockdown and everything made it very difficult to, make films. Not just because of COVID restrictions that made it difficult to actually get on set and sort of get people together, but also because the leadership in the club had kind of turned over. The people who were running it for the past 3 years were no longer running it. And so I basically had a fresh start of, a whole new group of people that I was working with in order to rebuild the club. So the biggest priority for me was getting people to be aware that the club even existed in the first place. So literally anyone who I knew who was even remotely interested in film, and even people who weren't interested in film, I just told them about the club, about the resources that it offered, because it's an incredibly unique club. Not many schools have film cameras, serious cameras that you can just, pick up and use. We had red cameras, we had, Blackmagic Ursas, we had all the film equipment you would need, lights, sound recording equipment, anything, right? And one of the things that surprised me when I was doing the Duke and LA program at USC was that film students there, they actually paid out of pocket a lot of times for their own productions. So they would do these fundraiser campaigns in order to get equipment from rental houses. USC had some equipment that they could use, some grip equipment, but the vast majority of the larger productions that I was on, the MFA thesis films that I was, a part of, they had grant money or they had done a fundraiser in order to get the level of equipment that you would need to sort of do a Hollywood level style production, right? With red cameras and serious sound equipment. But at Freewater Productions, we just had this equipment available because over the years, we've been able to accumulate it. And it was funded through Duke University Union, which is the largest organization on campus at Duke. So I wanted people to be aware of these resources because there was a small but growing film community at Duke. And Duke's never really been known as a film school. It's more focused on science, technology, and then especially finance, econ, stuff like that. But there is a solid arts community at Duke. It doesn't necessarily all revolve around film, but I met so many talented filmmakers and people who are really, really passionate about film, and not all of them knew about the resources of Freewater. So that was step one, getting people to know about the club. I just put flyers everywhere, tried to get people to come to interest meetings, tried to pitch people on why they should join the group me or join the email newsletter, stuff like that, just to get people interested. That was what I did basically that entire first semester, plus working with the administrative side of Duke in order to actually buy equipment. We hadn't really been able to purchase equipment in the past 3 years, which meant that we had actually saved up a lot. But it meant that I needed to do some research and decide what to get. So one of the biggest purchases I made was for a red V-Raptor camera package and a new set of, sound equipment and recording equipment. But the red camera was a game changer because the previous red camera we had used was also great, but it was about 12 to 14 years old at that time. This new red camera was a top of the line cinema camera. There were, it was, for example, that was what Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was shot on, primarily. And so it's a type of camera that, with the right color grading, editing, resources, you can make something look incredibly professional, and we could actually compete with schools like NYU and with USC and with these film schools that, where film students had these really nice camera packages. So the way that Freewater operated is that anybody on campus, if they have an idea for a film, they can pitch it and we can approve it and help them by giving them the resources they need. So like the cameras, the lights, the sound equipment, and connect them with the right people. So if they're a director, we can pair them with a cinematographer, and we can pair them with people who can take care of the sound and who can help on set. And if it's a writer, we can maybe pair them with a director who can help, complete that second stage of the project, anything like that, right? And one of the things that I really took a lot of pride in was that we really didn't turn down many projects. So that first semester, it was a ton of admin work. We were, clearing out the supply closet, getting new equipment, getting people interested in the club. And by the second semester of my senior year, we were actually finally ready to roll. And that was probably one of the busiest times of my entire life, because suddenly we went from having no film projects the previous semester to doing a new film every single week. And so I was working with tons of filmmakers, getting them the resources that they needed in order to create these projects. Some of which were class projects, some of which were passion projects. Whatever it was, I wanted to make sure that everyone had a good experience and that everyone had fun. That was actually my primary purpose, was for people to have fun so that they kept coming back and that they joined other people's sets. And that they didn't just, direct their own film, they also helped another filmmaker. Because that's how I wanted to create this collaborative community. I didn't want to create this community of people who are always thinking about themselves and how to make their projects, the best project ever. Film really works well when it's a ton of people who are excited about helping each other and know how to supply their strengths to someone else's project. So one of the first projects we did was actually from a filmmaker who I met through the Duke and LA program. It was one of his thesis films, and it was such a well-run production. He had written the story, and now he was directing it. And the cinematographer for that film, Kira Upin, was someone who I thought she was just super professional, and I trusted Christian Olsen, the director, to sort of work with people who really knew their stuff. And I knew that she had done documentaries and that she was a photographer as well. And so I asked her to come on board for a film that I was directing to help me with the visual style. And so together we were able to come up with the storyboards and the designs for how we're going to shoot and film Ritual for Love, which is the short film that I directed my senior year of college. The first project that we actually used the red V-Raptor for was actually this project that didn't actually take place at Duke. It was a director, he wanted to shoot a fencing film, and this was probably one of the most serious projects that I had ever worked on. He was able to put together some funding for it and hired this real, professional actor to play the coach of this fencer who was trying to, make it to the Olympic trials. And the fencer in real life, he was actually an Olympic fencer who was trying to get more into acting and modeling. And so overall, that was a super cool experience. And we were able to fly out, me and a couple other Duke students, to New York to shoot it at one of the oldest, I think it's the oldest fencing gym in the country. But it's a super historic place in the middle of Manhattan. And that was my first time ever going to New York. And I kind of fell in love with the city. And it was a totally different kind of filmmaking vibe than Los Angeles. Sort of more indie and more independent, but yeah, it was absolutely awesome. And man, that is the beach. So that's making me super, super excited for Los Angeles and everything that's gonna come. The shoot ended up being phenomenal and super, super professional. And we rented out these Cook lenses. They were these really beautiful prime anamorphic lenses. And so the film turned out beautifully and kind of raised my standards for what film production can get to, especially at kind of an amateurish level, because this was a guy who was just a Duke student and he was pulling off this really impressive production. So got back to Duke, and now it was time to actually direct my film. I had my actors lined up and everything was ready, the script was ready, I had a production plan ready, and so it was just go time. But, you know, this was all happening in the span of just like a couple months. All these projects, and I was like, at the same time that I was doing my film, I was also basically producing everybody else's film, getting, you know, lining up dates for when they're gonna film, making sure that no one's like, you know, filming at the same time as someone else, trying to make sure that all these filmmakers had the resources that they needed. And it was kind of in directing my film, like I had a blast, and it was one of the most fulfilling creative projects that I've ever done. But I realized that like directing isn't necessarily the like one thing that I wanted to do in my life. And over again, like in this video, what I'm trying to emphasize is that you really don't have to have like one thing that you think you're gonna do for the rest of your life. You know, at the time, I thought maybe it could be directing. That's what I thought going into the project. But I realized that I had like just as great of a time producing and helping other people like put their projects together. And it wasn't like I needed to be a director. I still had a ton of fun on the project, and it was just a reminder that being on set is one of my favorite places on earth. And it's so much better when you're doing it with friends. In corporate settings and in other kind of like settings, it's really hard to get that feeling of fulfillment from working on a creative project. But with film, it's just like right there. Like, yeah, you're putting in like really long hours and you're working really hard for pay that is sometimes non-existent or just really low. But there is just such a level of purpose, fulfillment, and creative satisfaction that you get from being a part of a project like that. So pretty much every week, my senior year, like my second semester, was super hectic. It was just basically like another project every single week, and sometimes a little bit of drama, like filmmakers who maybe wanted to film at the same time, or, you know, stuff like that. Making sure people could like work together was like one of the biggest things that I tried to do. But ultimately, I'm super proud of the work that we were able to do. And at the end of the year, we did this huge festival where we got to screen everybody's movie, and it was just such an amazing experience to see the film community from Duke go from, you know, like basically just a few people to now this huge, like, you know, like 50 maybe people overall who were like invested in film and wanted to make more projects and wanted to come to set. And so I was really happy that like the next year, like the person who I left the club to, who's actually going to be my roommate in Los Angeles, that he was able to sort of like take the reins of the club and expand upon it and really like continue getting people into film and continue this film community that I felt like was one of the most fulfilling communities that I have ever been part of. So senior year went by basically in a flash, like I knew it would, but I was super happy that I had prioritized relationships, that I went out of my way to, you know, grab lunch with friends, and that I wasn't like a shut-in. At this time, I had gotten over like a good chunk of the social anxiety that I had developed in my sophomore and junior year of college. And so I was finally starting to sort of feel comfortable just like going out and doing stuff and meeting people and, you know, having fun time with like my friends. And graduation was incredible, but, you know, it was also a little bit scary because I didn't have anything lined up. And, you know, I had applied to UTA, this talent agency, but I hadn't heard back, and the strikes were happening. It was just a really chaotic time in Hollywood. You know, everyone who I talked to, it felt like no one really knew what the future was going to hold for the film industry, right? People are scared of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all these digital platforms that attention seems to be going towards. And so for a little bit, I was honestly questioning like this career path. Like, you know, I don't have a job lined up. I graduated college and then moved back home with my parents in Houston and just had no idea what I wanted to do. I just got the first job that I could think of and started waiting tables at this Italian place. All right, I made it to LA finally and just unpacking some stuff. Got my bed and everything, so gonna take this all out and yeah, put it together. So I'm finally here in LA, and it feels really surreal because for the past 3 years, this is what I've been working towards. So I'm feeling very grateful for my past self. I really like the apartment. It's in a great location. It's pretty much just in the center of the city. So I was able to get to Santa Monica the other day in like 20 minutes. And since I have a car this time, I've been able to explore a lot more of the city. So I went to Manhattan Beach the other day for the first time and thought it was really lovely. It was just such a picturesque oceanside town. And then I went to Westwood for the first time. I had passed through it before while riding the metro, but this was the first time I actually walked around, and it was a really cool area. We went to this bar that had a bunch of like newspaper snippets and things like that. It's also just a very convenient location, I think, generally for getting around. So like I said, I'm going to be starting work next week. Long term, what I want to do in LA is represent YouTubers and filmmakers who want to take advantage of everything that YouTube has to offer. I'm super excited to learn more about the industry, and I feel like I have no idea what's going to come next. If you've made it to this point, you're probably interested in the film industry. I've got my email down below in case you want to reach out, and I love when people ask questions. And if you love film, you probably love A24. But do you know the story behind the brand? How did they grow to a $3.5 billion valuation in just 12 years? Why does every director want to work with them? And how did they actually take over Hollywood? You can find out in my last video here. Alright, that's it for now. More to come soon. Yeah, let me know what you'd like to see next.